Thank you, Rajesh. Welcome everyone to this discussion, and thanks Architecture Live for putting this together and such a personal introduction for all of us. Yeah, thank you. Okay, guys, just to kick in, I'm gonna set the precedent from the perspective of we can't ignore the burst of these AI tools that are being thrown in our face every day. It's very difficult to catch up, and and especially I am currently being educated by my Insta feed where literally every day one reel pops up and says 20 new tools to um, text to music, text to image, writing, content, everything. So it's in our face all the time. So it's absolutely difficult to ignore, and something that we shared yesterday that it's so gung ho that conversations about Meta and AR and VR that we were doing about 6 months back have kind of left in the parking lot. They're not in the foreground anymore. So what I would like to steer this conversation a bit is the fact that this new set of tools, if I may, which obviously has a deep concept regarding machine learning or NLP as the foundation. But what impact would it create on, first, the design fraternity? Second, I would probably set it up in a panel in a manner that within the design fraternity, this subset of architectural design. So what's its impact on architectural design, and probably also architectural design from perspective of academia, practice, administrative roles, and so on and so forth. And the last bit is, what would you reckon is the impact on the AEC industry itself? So we've all got our views from the fact that it has the potential to remain in the digital realm, come out of the digital realm in a physical construct. So from the AEC industry, so to kick off, I would just like quick inputs from everyone on what do you guys reckon is happening at the moment being the critical word, and what is your personal larger interest vis-a-vis AI? So I'm just going to start in the same order as introduction. So Anas and Alpha, what do you guys think here? You're on mute, huh? Both of you.
Yeah. Hi. So at the moment, we are in a very interesting time here because it has been released to public widely, so everyone got access to it. Like in few months ago, it was like accessible for very few entitled people. So most of us were the prompts were very young, and it started getting really wild one. And there is this thing called prompt engineering after this. So after that, it got really wild. So for us as an architecture practice, we start exploring this, and we were surprised by how good it is. At first, it was like we can imagine our past, which we couldn't have. So as we're from Kerala, we don't have much of the built works, unlike North India or anywhere else in the rest of the world. So we don't have many master architects and all. So from that curiosity, we started exploring AI. So we could imagine how it could go for us, what it would have been if certain movements were happened in Kerala. Like, for example, brutalism. We don't have brutalism in Kerala. So we started exploring these things. And after a certain point, we got really good at prompting, to say. So yeah, so now it's very refined, and we are very focused on what we want. Absolutely. So as a tool, it is really helping us to expand our practice and our design thinking.
Right. Anas, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll like to add by re-editing the caption itself. It's the creativity is not in peril. Creativity is in prosperity, because it's time of abundant opportunity. We should focus. Architects should come back to architecture itself, because it's the highest time to come back to the field. Because AI is just an umbrella term for the encompassing the various approaches in computer science and focusing and mimicking its cognitive with human minds. It's not about replacing human architects, but rather expanding their abilities and exploring new possibilities. I guess we also have to. Do we have time for a small video?
I'm gonna come back to that because there are a couple of conversations. So I just want to get a point of view from everyone as a starting point, and then I'll circle back to you, Anas, on that.
Okay. You can go back. Go to next question.
So Ayodh, from your perspective here, what do you think is happening, and your larger interests? You're on mute, yeah, Ayodh. You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah. Honestly, I've actually spent I've exhausted my free trials on Stable Diffusion DALL-E, I think within about 15 minutes. And then, so that has been the level of engagement with, that I've had with these tools directly. But I've been sort of paying attention again on social media and other things of what people have been posting and what results have been people are generating with these, specifically architects and designers, and that's been very interesting. But sort of, to me, that the whole AI, the kind of what's happening right now is not really of that much interest to me right now, because what I'm most interested in architecture is the physical aspect of it and the building. Okay, I mean, we can imagine and we can draw on a computer with the pen, paper, whatever, and that's fine. But to me, the impact of architecture on the environment begins only when you actually start doing something, intervening in the environment. So representation doesn't yet get there. I mean, yes, it has implications for the environment, but it doesn't actually impact the environment. So that's why, to me, I'm sort of still somewhat detached. But in terms of my interest in this and understanding of it, my research sort of in the last 4 or 5 years has been related to trying to use machine learning to improve, to sort of, at a very, very preliminary stage, to sort of see how we might be able to build for specific environments better, or how it can help us do that. So yeah, I guess I'll go into more detail later, but that's sort of where I am with this, if that makes sense.
All right. And Anuradha, just pointing the same in your direction here.
Thank you, Abhishek. I think it's an interesting time to be in. I think there's a lot of rushing. I think it feels to me a lot like a lot of people have started drawing without knowing architecture. It feels a lot like that. It's almost as if it's just starting to draw buildings without really knowing the field of architecture. To me, it feels like a lot of what we are doing and saying about AI is a lot like that. Not a lot of people are trained, but a lot of people are using it anyway. So it's interesting and a little bit problematic, I think. I also think it is not, there's a lot of polarization in the field. So suddenly a lot of people are for AI and a lot of people are against AI. So I think it's getting quite quickly polarized, and I think it's a good time to be undecided. I don't think it's really a question about whether you like AI or you don't, or you adopt it. We've all been using AI, and it's beyond architecture, from translating websites to fitting your images on a PowerPoint presentation to sorting spam to, virtually everything is AI. So we've been using this for a long time. So there's really not a question of whether it's here to stay, on if it's useful. And again, the conversations shouldn't really get polarized into, I'm for or against it. I think I've used the different open access platforms, at least in terms of graphic design. And I think I really look at it as a collaborative tool. I think it's a tool with which the human and machine creativity is in a collaborative synthesis. So it's not that, oh, there is such a thing as human creativity, because we've been using tools, technologies of all kinds from for a long time anyway. So to say that human creativity is something quite pure without the influence of technology is rather silly. So I think definitely creativity is something that is going to be interesting to explore in terms of AI, because I think it's a collaborative act. So yeah, so I'll just close at that point there. Thanks, Abhishek.
Interesting. Just picking up on the same thought train. So for example, nobody questions the potency or relevance of Google, right? Searching anything online, and Google I use very loosely as replaceable with Bing and Yahoo and so on and so forth. So is AI in the current format, and this anybody can just pick on this, AI in the current format is fighting a perception battle? Like, for example, Ayodh, you categorically said that you think that currently it has no impact on the built environment, and at least that's the extraction I got. And also at the moment, the most obvious example of marriage of AI and architecture is something, and the installations of Rafiq Anadol on the Walt Disney Museum, or this work he's done for MoMA. But then again, that is visual art, and the conversation can be made on whether visual art has an impact on built environment or not. And just to pick up on something that Anuradha also said, the fact that there are a lot of users and who are not trained enough. So it also has a connotation of being a toy at the moment. So is there again, I'll repeat my question, is there a perception battle that's currently out there? What we think as humans that AI is capable of, and what AI is probably genuinely capable of? Anybody can just pick on that. Yeah.
See, one thing is that whether we like it or not, there are some of the world's biggest and richest companies behind this. So there is a lot of their marketing and budget behind a lot of this discourse. So yeah, that's just something I wanted to kind of put out there, that sort of what we are doing here versus the kind of extent of information or material that is being, or discourse that is being generated and disseminated from the companies who've put a lot of money into this and who are, I'm assuming, planning to make a lot of money out of this, is what is dominating a lot of the conversation here.
I think that's absolutely spot on. The point that you're making about being owners of big data, and who owns this data. I think that's important. And they're going to be, I suppose, people who are going to set the tone and really set the agenda. And so I think the question you're asking is good. Like, do we even have a voice in this? Do we even have a stake in this? But I agree. I like the way you phrased it, perception battle. Definitely, but I do think a lot of us need to be trained. I mean, I think there's a lot of, I think a lot of people have opinions and without really knowing what it is. And I think all of us, even including in this panel, probably know little about it. And I think we need to be more informed about it.
Just continuing on the thread, so Anas and Aflah, there's a few things. So you said, Aflah, very categorically that you got better with prompts, and you're able to, I'm assuming, able to generate ideas that are closer to what you had in mind when you started out, right?
Yeah.
So I'll frame the perception battle slightly different for you. Is this a perception of what AI is capable of doing, or is this a perception of what architects are now capable of doing?
As Ayodh started out, as there is a perception battle, they are pushing out more narrative and discourse on AI is too good. It's partly also because of for past few years there has been our technological development has been in stagnant, and suddenly this rise of AI gave something to people, and so we are all excited about it. So that's why all the loads of reels and Instagram, it's full of AI, and so there is a perception, misperception that AI can replace humans and all something like that. So as I said earlier, uh, once you start using it, it feels like very much a toy. So there will be a lot of curiosities to unroll. So you start out with simple prompts and you will get whatever AI is giving. So slowly there is a learning curve. We will start learning how the machine is giving us the results. So we start tweaking out our prompts. So there is a learning curve. Once we pass that, we can really make use of it as even if it's a chat GPT or DALI or whatever platform it is. So we have been exploring DALI, Midjourney, and whatever platform we have, because we have very few credits. So we are trying to make use of every platform. So every time, even if we revisit the same prompts in few months, there will be a drastic difference in the results generated. So it's growing really fast as it should be, because it's learning from our inputs as well. So if we did a prompt in February last time, this year, and we did the same a few weeks back. So the results, the aesthetics, the change is really different. So also the other thing is how the aesthetics it is producing is also pushing the perspective that AI is really good. Sometimes it could be very boring stuff or boring forms or things, but the aesthetics, the colors, it could be really nice. So we have a false perception what they're producing is really good. So it's still, it is up to us to decide whether what AI is generating is good for us or not. So it's still in our control as of now.
Fair point. And just I'm going to pivot it categorically on Anuradha this time. And from the perspective of academia, Anuradha, is it a threat to education? I mean, there is an obvious burden of the pseudo perjury that this cloud always hangs on our head, whether this is original work or not, or it's adding value to both students and teachers.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the answer is yes and no. The answer is yes, it's a problem where it concerns student work. See, because look, Abhishek, the nature of student learning, I mean, there's a lot of assignments and assessment that are still based on input and output, which is what is a format mapping on which AI is based. So I think it's really time to question that, whether we need to change the way we ask questions and what kind of questions we ask. Absolutely, there's an issue about academic integrity, and there's a lot of reporting in social media about student copying, and but then that has been collusion and ghostwriting has been there for decades, right? So don't blame it on AI. So I mean, you give students stupid tasks, they will find somebody to do it for them. Either it'll be a consultant or it'll be an AI, right? So I think to me, it's an interesting challenge. And I think, thank heavens, there's an interesting challenge, because that means we have to rewrite the playbook and just have to do it differently. I think, however, there are benefits. For instance, there might be some benefits for teachers. For instance, especially when we're talking about the teachers don't, I mean, it's a labor, and a lot of the labor is not really intellectual labor. And I think you've heard students, like teachers complain about that, well, is this really teaching? Whether you're marking attendance or doing results analysis, or you're writing and marking MCQ tests, or providing written feedback to a large body of students. And, a lot of this work could leverage, if you know what you want, if you're clear about your objectives, I think you can really make lives of teachers easier, and leaving them free to do the care work, because so much of teaching is care work. It's not just that kind of, administrative labor, but there's a lot of labor of care that teachers have to be involved in. So I think it could really free up teachers' times. But I really think but when it concerns students, it really challenges us to stop asking stupid questions that have already been answered, therefore they exist in the AI data set. We just really need to dismantle this whole thing of assessment and evaluation. And that's an interesting burden. And that's an interesting challenge, I think, for us as academics. Yeah, thank you.
No, I mean, that's a fair point, because one thing that everybody kind of agrees on is the fact that a lot of repetitive menial tasks can immediately be looked after and everyone's happy about it. I think there is definitely, in what you said, there is definitely a direction that teachers' aid, AI has already come for you, for a teacher's aid in that perspective. All the assistance is getting looked after. From academia to again practice. This one's again for Anas and Aflah. So, from the perspective of practice, is it again an aid for the creative process? Have you guys have already answered it to a larger to some extent? But even in, for example, at the studio of ZHA, there was a recent talk by Patrick where he shared this immense cataloging of what ZHA is doing, and their prompts in DALL-E or Midjourney are starting with, imagine a museum in the design language of Zahadid architects. So the prompt for Zahadid architects is Zahadid architects, and it's spitting out images which arguably could be their work, and they're relying on those catalogs as if a regular practice would rely on what House or Pinterest spits back at you when you get the prompt right. So is it definitely just now? Could you just elaborate with whatever visual tools that you want to, just suggesting that whether it's a creative assistant or not?
The first thing we understood while exploring this is how the machine thinks. So it's a very innately inhuman way that thinks just by logic. How we think is historically. We relate ourselves to history, we relate ourselves to other things. What if we ask AI to generate a ZHA from like a building museum in desert in ZHA styles, it just goes through the previous ZHA projects and just put a desert and give a form. So from this, we started like, as I said earlier, as Kerala, we don't have much master architects or anything or great built heritage other than from vernacular to modernism. There is a huge gap, like unlike Laurie Baker or name a few architects. So for us to inspiration, for us to continue our practice in our region, we have to have something to look forward to. So we used to look at other similar regions in Southeast Asia or Latin America, which has similar climate and geographies. So what can we do? What formal exploration can we do? So we were extensively documenting our heritage in Kerala as a practice, Art Deco, vernacular mosques and modern houses, how we got there. So suddenly we got access to this tool as AI. So we started imagining what Mario Botta would have designed in Kerala, or what Jeffrey Ba would have, what Le Corbusier might have built in Kerala. So we started out with simple prompts, and we slowly started learning how this thing works. So we have to tie the AI into history. So then only can it generate more to real life forms and buildings, rather than just we directly go a house in Kerala. It will randomly generate something which could be no use for any of us, as also it becomes just a tool. So we started doing this, carefully curating our inspirations and what we want into prompts, and we start generating. So yeah, so we are in a very sweet spot at the moment now. So we have a lot of content with us as formal explorations, which we try to call it as imagined past or future past. What this so we are currently in a process of documenting this properly. This was very an informal exploration. We haven't thought of it, making it as a proper research. So we are in the process of doing it and documenting, and someday we might publish it to the wider audience to i- invite more people into this AI expression.
Right. Anas?
Yeah, as we discussed before, the ethical use of the AI depends on the intentions and biases of the individual programming it. So we want a new type of architects, new hybrid of architects that can code and that can no, they can program, they can code. They are very good at computing. We want a new hybrid of architects with the help of the institutions. We can start a AI think tank in India-based or with a relation to the institutions like a SEPT think tank, so that we can improve and make. First we want to make awareness among the architects itself, because it's high time we want to change into or incorporate into the AI. We want to use it as a tool or a toy. We want to implement this in our practice as soon as possible. Otherwise, we will lack. Otherwise, the people who don't know about architecture or nothing, they will program with their bias, and we have to use their own version of architecture. We will lose our version of architecture. Also, in future, no, in past, there were Cooper Union and all other institutions. The architects like Lebbeus Woods and John Haydock and Raymond Abraham, they were created and Peter Eisenman, they were created a large amount of work, that paper architecture. Paper architecture was the basic for the future practices, or what the extension of their practice. We want that kind of practices in India. We lack paper architects in India, and yeah, that's it. And yeah, as you mentioned, there is a lack of. It's very biased. The data is very biased. So we get the Zahadi version of parametric easily in with these diffusion softwares, but we don't much get the Indian versions because we don't have data. All the data we don't have is in our schools, in papers. We don't have nothing in online. If we don't have internet history, we don't have history in future. So that's it.
That's a fair point. I'm going to circle back to the biases of AI from a larger other perspectives as well. Just to continue the thread of architectural practice, Ayodh, this one's for you. Do you also think that it has some tangible aspects? Like, for example, can AI measure? Is there a potential to measure a certain value like building efficiency, carbon footprints? Are we there yet? And this is again coming from maybe not AI, but the backbone of AI, which is machine learning and NLP and so on and so forth.
See, so, I mean, large language models that are the immediate context for this discussion. They are notoriously bad at numerical calculations. Like a lot of the AI bloopers that are sort of circulating are exactly the sort of thing of ChatGPT not being able to add 3 numbers in some kind of a list and that kind of thing. So these are large, because these are large language models. These are not numerical models. So in that sense, that isn't particularly useful for that. Sorry, could you repeat the question? I lost that.
No, what I meant was like, is there tangibility to this? So, for example, is it assisting in calculating building efficiency to a certain degree?
Not yet. See, and that's the other thing, because right now what we have is what ChatGPT and these other things are. They are aiming for artificial general intelligence. What we are talking about here would be domain-specific AI. And I think from a from the perspective of the software companies, once you have an artificial general intelligence, then it's easier to then, that's the bigger challenge. And then now you can kind of direct it towards any particular niche subject and train it on that and improve that. But so in that sense, the big challenge has been overcome. So I would say that the only reason that this doesn't exist yet is because nobody's applied this towards that in a meaningful, like there are academic papers and other things doing this, but in terms of an everyday practice kind of thing, it's not there yet, but it will be there's nothing stopping this from happening. It's just, we just have to get around to doing it.
I think that's very interesting. And this is probably not loyal necessarily. This argument of being specific is not necessarily loyal to architecture industry, to the medical industry and law and so on and so forth. So, there's a lawyer bot that definitely exists that we've been hearing about it. And there is a website, there are a couple of websites now on it assisting on your state law. So for architecture as well, I think you're absolutely bang on right that the current tools are more generic, and it's just about someone applying their mind to it.
Yeah.
And Anuradha, two questions. So first one is, do you reckon there is a technical or infrastructural requirement for exploring AI? And the other one, I think, which is more important, is that whether there is a mental, emotional, and rather organizational preparedness to tackle with this world of AI.
Yeah, I think again, I think maybe it just goes back to my point. Thank you about that. I think organizations and even companies, they need to work out what their AI project is going to be, and need to set up a team. You can need to have a pilot project, and then you need to develop a strategy. So I think that's important, that you need to kind of think big as to what is going to be your inroad into AI. So I think, as Anas and Aflah have already talked about their project, I think that has a lot of clarity as to why they're doing that. There's a strong intentionality, and there's a strong objective and outcome. I think that's absolutely needed, and that applies. Even to organization, or maybe a design school or university at large. I think because the universities are already doing that. So I'm not sure about India, but in Australia, at least, a lot of universities already have their AI for governance strategy, that there's a corporate strategy that is already in place. So I think that mindset has to be there, that, how is this going to be of use to me? For instance, if you are a manager of a large university, you're in fact managing built environment. It is within the domain of architecture. And university buildings and learning and teaching spaces require a huge amount of financial investment. And to this end, audits are done. And I think this is where I think also organizations can really start to think of, well, how am I going to actually do my audit? Am I really going to put human resources behind this, or am I going to automate that? Whether it's going to mean measuring performance, use, safety, compliance, all of that. I think that's part of, all of that is really architecture. The point I was making is that there is no such thing as not architecture, right? Everything that we're doing, including doing a facilities management of a larger infrastructure, is also part of architecture. So I think the point is that we need to be clear about what these projects are, how they can add value, and whether they can be done. In fact, I think that kind of just that's what I was trying to answer.
We've
kind of about readiness to take it on. Yeah.
So I think the sense of what you're also saying, we're way beyond that moment where you present a brick wall or a glass wall as against not adapting to AI. We've already crossed that threshold. We're way beyond that.
Yeah.
There is no conversation of if we would be. It's just how now at an organizational level.
Having clear objectives, like a lot of organizations have organizational objectives. This is my objective, and this is my AI strategy. So I think that mindset needs to be there. And I think smaller firms like the people we have in the panel today, they have clarity on why in fact they are using AI. It's not just exploration. They have a very clear intention behind it. So which is quite commendable. Yeah, I think we're just saying intention and outcome. There has to be a kind of a connection between the two.
Okay. Anas and Aflah, now again back at you. Do you guys, would you like to show some of the work that you guys have been doing, and also where do you see it being developed further? Like what would you like to be there for you to use, or you would like to develop yourselves? Where what's the ceiling that you've hit, and how do you expect to go beyond? And if you can just support it with some, I think Anas wanted to share a video earlier.
Yeah, I will share the video. Aflah will explain later.
Sure. I hope you have sharing rights. Yeah, there we go.
This is one of our Kerala future past. We are exploring with in different teams. This is one.
So this is an impressive body of work, guys. I mean,
Yeah. If we don't really look after what it is generating, it's going to be really wild.
Precisely. I was going to say this seems like the earlier explorations, and which is
these are the earlier
now
explorations.
massaged to what Anas showed earlier.
Yeah.
This is another theme in the future.
So what we learn from all these questions is AI is really good at thinking in materiality. If we specifically say this context, it will come up with the materials in that region. That's what we are observing these days now.
So what's the difference in the like? So for example, what's the maturity in the prompts that you had in the early explorations and these ones? What's the learning?
Anas, can you explain?
Yeah, it's really good. First, we are incorporated like Tada designed Kerala house, or Zahad designed Kerala house, like that kind of beginning. Because there is, if we type Lori Becker designed Kerala house, there is nothing. There is
Really?
the data were not accurate, because there is not enough data about the these regional architecture things. So we have been forced to do this with the Adid or Peter Eastman, or like this. The data about these architects are larger in internet. So we have to incorporate it into the Kerala context. So in materiality, we tweak. So, with the time, we learned how to tweak these prompts with the use of available data. So these like Tadavando designed Kerala, and then we will apply some materialistic things, and we will apply some tectonics, and then add the counts like monumentality and tectonic monumental like things, and we will give a clear idea about the context. This is tropical or something, and then this is actually a tweaking of the what we have available.
What we have in mind and what is available. So it's a sweet spot.
From that perspective, so what would you guys like to, what would you hope and pray, or would like to develop further in terms of these tools? Like what should be their capability to assist you further?
We are aiming at incorporating this in our build projects sooner or later. So the forms we got from these are very experimental. What could have happened in Kerala if it went through a avant-garde movement back in the 70s or 80s. So something like that. So this is a very radical experience for us through these images. So we can look at the forms and how to incorporate in our designs when we start designing for the real projects. Real as in these are.
It's very believable, because some of the stuff you're already saying, like some of these images, they seem absolutely
machine they're
possible.
actually built. Yeah, it's
Built, yeah.
actually
Correct,
yeah.
correct.
It sometimes even calculates the structure. It feels like so the column layouts and all sometimes aligns very well. So the thing
No,
is,
but
we can't really know how these
but I'm
AI
just
thinks. Yeah.
sorry, I'm just going to repeat my question. So would you as a result, would you like that there is some sort of a development which picks up these imagery and assists in a technical representation in terms of drawings of 3Ds of these imagery? Would that be the
Yeah,
next step for you for a
that's
practice
where
like
we
yours?
are heading to as a practice. That's where we are heading to, converting this into plans, drawings, and tangible files, so we can explore this more. So we are sorting out the best grounded images, as in the most realistic generations from the results,
Understood.
and we are planning to make this into plans and assess the workability and
Right.
yeah.
And our role as an architect changed to the curators. We are more like curating things at the initial conceptualization stages, and we want to dream. We are going to the essence of architecture that
Anas,
we want to.
what you're saying today now, this takes me back to the first time that I read about parametric design, and the example that pops up is the One North town plan by Zahadi, the architects, and where Zaha and Patrick were claiming that now architects would be setting up only systems, and the systems will take forms based on whatever inputs and parameters that the stakeholder would demand.
Yeah,
Like,
we want to vision.
so the FR calculations, the form is obviously is a subset of the system that you set up, and architects are going to design those systems and not necessarily the nuts and bolts of it. We've got 10 years or 20 years of review of that conversation, and I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. And also the fact that architects unfortunately haven't managed to alienate themselves at the complete other end of the spectrum. But I just want to just change the track a bit to something that you guys said about the fact that you honestly could not get happy answers with Laurie Baker and Kerala architecture. And I just want to bring back the conversation to the bias. And there are probably two conversations in one. And Anuradha shared a very interesting anecdote. You can stop sharing. I'm just going to change the track of the conversation a little. Anas, do you mind just stop the share? Yeah. So some interesting anecdote, Anuradha, you shared yesterday while we were discussing this, that when you punch in your name into ChatGPT and the topics of your interest, there is a lot of jargon that gets thrown back with assumed bibliography. And also something that these guys touched about the bias that the world of AI currently has. Do you just want to throw some light from your experience on that?
I think I love Anas's wording, how you said, if you don't have internet history, you don't have history. Is that I think you said something like that. I think I really like that because I think that really goes to the core of this thing that we're saying, we're calling it bias. And well, anecdotes, yes. I mean, I think I just very quickly tried, and I think this is a well-reported kind of bias, gender bias. It's a very kind of a very common, so one of these text-to-image open platforms, if you write CEO, you get a man, you say doctor, you get a white man, you get lawyer, you get a white man, you put janitor, you don't even get a person. It's an animation, it's a caricature. Just straight away that tells you about what it says, what it thinks about the word janitor. It's not a person. And all of these characters, all of these higher status jobs are all men, are all always white men. There was another platform in which I put in warrior, the word warrior. So again, text image, very simple things. 3 attempts, all men, because women can't fight. So again, the gender, class, creed, I mean, color, all of that is kind of coded in. And I think the discussion we were having prior to this was also that they're in fact our biases. In fact, we've taught the machine all of these things, and I think that data has to be corrected. I think, yeah. So these were the things, and ChatGPT is incredibly. I mean, there's a lot of rubbish, and I can't imagine how students would imagine that this is acceptable to submit. Yeah. So I based on my PhD, I put in did Ruskin. Pretty much the prompt was this: what did Ruskin write about? Did Ruskin write about textile architecture? My entire book is on John Ruskin and the fabric of architecture, and basically, it's in summary. It says, not really, it didn't really say that. And it gave me a whole lot of general stuff. So it's not even accurate in terms of my publications. It's all out there in terms of data sets. So the data set is out there. So even in terms of understanding that question. So I think it brings back to that question, does it really understand what you're asking? Or is this question too simple for it to give you an intelligent answer? If your question is not intelligent, you're probably going to get an unintelligent answer anyway. But yeah, I think I'm sure you all have come across this idea of bias, and also I think we have a lot of these examples of fake deep fakes, creation of fakes, and I think so maybe some of you can speak to that as well, who've really encountered that. Yeah.
And this conversation on bias is very interesting, and I think you said it very briefly. It's not the bias of the AI. The way the AI is set up is what tons and tons of data that's human fed. So unfortunately, at the back end of it, a lot of white male CEO images were fed to, Mid-Journey prompters for a Mid-Journey to spit out a white man as a CEO.
And talking about class, the janitor is not even a person. It's not a man or a woman. It's not even a person.
Correct. So unfortunately, this is a larger human race bias that still exists for AI to just pick on it and make it echo much more now. And while this is a larger anthropological question, I'm still stuck on the fact that Caroline Laurie Baker doesn't spit out anything. And that's unfortunately you have to rely on changing the materiality on Ando's work or Sullivan's work to make it more relevant for the context that we live in. I'm just going to hold this thought for a bit and just come back. Ayodh, you've been actually talking about machine learning before it became a buzz. From an academic research point of view, could you throw us some light on that, please? Like, what is machine learning, which is the foundation of AI? Do you see reflections of it being more massaged? Like, what's happening?
Could I carry that? Could I merge this answer into the current discussion that you're having in place? Because I feel like,
absolutely.
So I don't want to shelve that just yet, because I think there is a very important connection there that we need to realize, which is that the AI is any kind of software that is able to mimic a human being in some way. So with ChatGPT, it's an attempt to create text which is believably human generated, right? Whereas machine learning is specifically an algorithm which is able to improve its own outputs over time, iteratively improve its own outputs. So it's able to learn. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of the fundamental difference there. Now with AI, if we ask the question, why are we trying to automate these tasks? Like, why, especially in, why are we trying to automate human imagination? Let's say, okay, I don't want to use the word creativity, that gets into a quagmire. So I'll just use imagination right now. Like in architecture, imagination has rarely ever been the problem. If we go all the way to like Bhimbetka or Gwalpahari or Lascaux or anywhere, and since humans have never had an issue with imagining. We dream every night. That's like imagination is not really a problem for us. So why? And that, for the way I see it, that goes back to a history of, since the Industrial Revolution, of the assumption that machines will take over human tasks as an inevitability. And that is and that is something that various people have assumed and various people have also challenged throughout history. So I mean, for example, William Morris challenged that. Gandhi challenged that with the charkha, saying that why does cotton have to be produced in Manchester? Why can't we do it at home on charkhas instead of in big mills? That kind of thing, right? So I feel like this current sort of thread of AI is, and why is that happening? That is happening because it gives people with money control over the means of whatever is being produced, right? Because if you are taking the skill of a human being and mechanizing that or automating that, then you as someone with no skill but with money can buy that machine or that piece of software and pay someone a menial wage to just press a button or to operate it, or just eliminate, with the ultimate fantasy being to eliminate the human entirely. Right. So that was just the connection that I wanted to make between the bias thing and and history and technology. And so for me, when Anuradha mentioned the whole thing of the typical CEO, typical janitor, typical warrior kind of thing, that these things that are produced by AI, that didn't surprise me at all, because white people have assumed that I was a janitor in 2 different universities in the US. So I mean, it's more of the same thing. It's fine. It's not like, it's no surprise that this is happening. So okay, so that was the connections. And now back to the actual question that you asked me, which I have obviously forgotten. Sorry.
No, I'm just saying you're dabbling with machine learning predates the fanciness of the AI tool. So
no, so for me, I've shared, being of the same generation. Again, my introduction to parametric design was exactly the same, that what you described of sort of where the architect's role is to in parametric design or generative design is to interpret the client's requirements and input that into some kind of an algorithm, so that the desired results are produced.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm old, maybe I'm irrelevant now, but the way I see it, machine learning can help us there and to tackle much more complex problems, because whether they be social problems in a sort of complex urban environment, or environmental issues in a complex ecological environment, in a changing climate, those kinds of things. So they're matching. That's where I've been coming from, and that yeah. So if that answers the question, I guess but on the other hand, again, and this goes back to bias again, which is that in a way I understand where AI is coming from and what it's trying to fill in, because architects historically have not a majority of buildings on Earth are not designed by architects, right? So as a profession, we've been unable to fulfill our mandate in a sense. So there are these technologies which are not doing not doing what we do, but are filling in that gap of people wanting, or they are likely to fill in that gap of people wanting, because wanting designed buildings for us. So I mean, why, if I charge whatever I charge as an architect, if for a design, for a lay person who doesn't understand what architects actually should be doing or are supposed to do, if they can just type in a prompt of, okay, I'd like a house of with a thatched roof and stone and in this location, and this AI spits out a bunch of images, they go to a local contractor and say, okay, build me this. Why not? Right? That's our fault that we are not able to cater to a majority of people. So that, I mean, that's sort of how I see it, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Okay. Very interesting. The relevance of the professional, I think ours is probably one of those trades where we continuously every year question our own relevance, and that's some sort of an insecurity that is very latent. So, and everything that pops up is like, oh my God, whether architects, not architecture, whether architects are relevant anymore or not. So very interesting. Okay, so little more extension of some generic conversation. So, you know, Hal in Space Odyssey or Jarvis in Iron Man, they've kind of captured our imagination and the potential of the AI. And I honestly think we're already there. And especially when you couple it with Alexas and Google Assistants of the world, we're pretty much there in what at least these sci-fi movies were to offer. And now what Jarvis can do and cannot do is dependent on what the other aspects of tech are possible or not. Like, you know, call in a flying suit. This is because maybe the flying suit does not exist, but Jarvis or Alexa has definitely got the capacity to summon a flying suit. So is there a limitation that you guys foresee is current and will always remain? And we've, in a sense, kind of touched upon this. So yeah, so and this is just generic. This is design and beyond. A limited AI that will probably persist. Anyone? Aflah?
Yeah, so the limitation of AI is asking us AI will be more like limitations of humans itself, because in the end we are creating AIs, and somehow we always tend to separate AI from humans, and we tend to forget that we made it. So it's always the limitation of our limitation. It's nothing beyond us, is what I like to think.
So you don't foresee a Zion kind of situation where we are, you know...
No, not at all. Yeah. So this will be part of our everyday life in few years. So we will start using, even in recent Google I/Os, they started generating wallpapers using AI for their new Pixel phones. So this kind of small subtle things will be everywhere around us. So it's about how we are hopping into it. Like we have to adapt it early or not. Somehow we'll be forced to adapt it later. So that will be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like you and Anuradha at one point said that it's not the question of if, it's just, you know, you have to.
Yeah.
So you might as well learn it. How does it integrate into the system that you set up? Sorry, Anuradha.
I was going to say, the main difference is decision making. It's still a black box. How do we make decisions, and how does that thing make decisions? Mm-hmm. Even if I was to ask you how you make that decision, it is not such it's not such a simple thing that we have a set of data and we go through certain iterations and then we know why we made that decision. When somebody says informed decision making, it's not really informed, is it? Because there's so many factors: environmental, contextual, emotional, psychological, intellectual, so many factors. And I also question, to what extent do we know, are we in touch with our own humanity? I love how we question the humanity of AI and we're not in touch with our own humanity. And a lot of times, Ayodh is nodding along. And thank you for that, because, it's just decision making is, and the tacit knowledge, because you talked about craft, Ayodh, because I think, and also you talked about Morris, and I say that tacit knowledge. They think, I have a feeling if I do this with the clay pot, I think that will be fine. I can't explain it. That unexplainability of human decision making, or that, I think that's the main difference, really. Whether that might diminish in the future, I'm not sure, but I think that's what really sets us apart, is the decision making.
Yeah, Ayodh.
So speaking to decision making, one thing which sort of at the moment currently fundamentally differentiates this current generation of AI that is available to the layperson from human decision making is that human decision making, because it is embodied in like the physical bodies, it is constantly seeking environmental feedback. So if I'm picking up this cup of tea here and drinking it, there are nerve signals going multiple times between sort of, okay, how heavy is this cup? Where is it? How much do I have to stretch? How much do I have to pull? So it's constant back and forth between the brain and the environment, which is absent in this current generation of AI, because it is trapped within the internet. And so one of the problems is, of course, that it doesn't know who Laurie Baker is, because there isn't as much data on Laurie Baker in the internet as compared to Tadao Ando or Zaha Hadid or anyone else. But that's at one scale. But that same thing at a smaller scale is also there in terms of this. So, which is why I think something that's potentially very exciting for the future is the integration of robotics with AI, where AI is able to find its own data in the physical world out there. That is what I would be genuinely excited by.
So robotics is essentially an extension of digital intelligence into the physical space. That's an extended arm. So like a watch makes me a cyborg to a certain degree, because I'm dependent on another machine to tell me time instead of looking at the sun. From that connotation, I don't know whether from that connotation, a robotic arm is an extension of digital intelligence. And now they are able to integrate or assimilate themselves into the physical world, into the human world.
Exactly, yeah.
Very interesting. Okay. The last bit, again, on the limitations, and we've touched on the error. However, there is an aspect of falsehood that exists in the current world, which the AI world terms as hallucinations. If the hallucinations persist, and for everyone, hallucinations is something when you're not getting correct data. For example, when Anuradha punches a PhD into ChatGPT, it throws out a bibliography that does not exist. So hallucinations do exist, and they exist to quite a degree. However, if hallucination again becomes non-omittable, any further interface, and even in the physical realm, that is loaded with error. So now AI is not completely reliant as any other goddamn human system that exists as well. So now there's an additional layer of gatekeepers that are required to sieve through the data that is thrown out by any AI tool. Right? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that in terms of this is something I've thought, and this is sort of very, very abstract and philosophical, but I just sort of feel that it is relevant to some extent. I hope it sounds relevant. That and this goes back to the idea of implicit knowledge, tacit knowledge, implicit knowledge or implicit bias, depending on how you want to sort of look at it from an ethical point of view. But see, the thing is that humans have evolved over millennia. And what is it that makes that evolution? Evolution is basically fitting into an environment, right? Because if you don't fit in that environment, you don't survive.
Survive, yeah, correct.
Right. It's as simple as that. AI has not gone through that yet.
Right, absolutely.
Because it's stuck within the internet, which is why a lot of what
it's very protected at the moment as well.
right. So which is why a lot of what it produces is nonsense. Because because as soon as it's taken out of its narrow bounds of knowledge, it fails, and it has no means to go outside of its narrow sphere of the internet. And the other thing is that it is basically finding things that is and again, it's a very simplistic characterization, but it is basically predictive tests on steroids, right? So it's just saying, okay, based on what I know from what I've learned from the internet, what is the most probable next thing, whether it's next sentence, next paragraph, next concept, whatever, right? That's sort of how it's working. But so epistemologically, it's coming from a very different place to humans or to biological life, which has been tested by evolution and is constantly tested by evolution. So in terms of truth or hallucination, which is the same thing as dreams, right? So when we are asleep and when we are dreaming, we can dream of all kinds of fantastical things because our thoughts are not constantly being checked by our environment. We aren't receiving visual stimulus. We are not receiving auditory stimulus under a certain volume, right? Our brain is sort of actively cutting off those stimuli. So we are hallucinating and hallucination. I mean, a dream, I would argue in this context, is a sleeping hallucination. A waking dream is a hallucination, whatever. You get what I'm saying, I hope. So at the moment, arguably, all of AI is hallucinating because it's stuck within the bounds of the internet or its training data set, whatever that may be. And it's not being subject to evolution.
Fair enough. Absolutely. Got your point.
To physical laws of physics, chemistry, that kind of thing. So
fair enough. Cool. I've run out of my queries. If any of us want to just continue a certain thought that we touched upon earlier, or there is something new on anyone's mind, we can touch upon it at this point. If not, we can just ask Architecture Live to close the session.
I have one very weird thought which popped into my head at the start of this discussion. It's completely untested, so it could be nonsensical. But again, from the perspective of bias and power structures, what has been up to now, through history, there has been a tendency towards privileging mental or intellectual labor over physical labor.
Okay.
Right. Because that's why architects get paid more than masons. I mean, a very simplistic example. Right. But now that we are getting closer and closer to automating more intellectual tasks, I wonder if that may be flipped in the future, where designing is the easy bit that, okay, you just put in your thing and it spits out a design, and then the actual difficult thing starts is, okay, how do you together? Someone has to build this thing. Yeah. And again, this is depending on where in the world you are. This has happened at various different times. It happened between ancient Greece and classical Greece in Europe. It happened, another iteration of it happened in Gothic Europe, or in the transition from Gothic to Renaissance in India and in other parts of the world. It happened during colonialism. So I wonder now if going down the road that might be flipped. And again, it's a very Matrix-like dystopian vision or utopian, I don't know, but where if it's cheaper for humans to do the physical labor instead of robots, then we'll be doing the physical labor. AI will be doing the intellectual tasks.
Correct.
And there'll be some weird level of collaboration between us all. I mean,
Correct.
that's sort of how that's where my brain has taken me at the end of this, like based on whatever we've been talking about here. Sorry, very random.
Correct.
I think it's a great premise. I think it's a great premise. Yeah, it's a great question and a prompt to, I think, end on. It's fantastic.
Great. Thanks, guys. Thanks for all your contribution. Just intrigued with the variety of discussion that we had. I think we're all observers of where this is heading, and maybe in 6 months' time we have a completely different perspective based on our own respective experiences. So look forward.